so I moved over from New Zealand about 7 years ago. I live around 30 minutes south of Sydney. I do still keep around 100 hives myself, which I do almonds and canola with and a couple of flows and stuff. I was trained with queen breeding as well, so I worked with guys that spent 25 years breeding Varroa resistant queens in Serbia. I was very, very lucky with that initial training, so I'll do my best to pass on as much of that knowledge today as I can. So I'll briefly cover off on the biology of Varroa and roughly how it breeds and how it kills the hive. So to start off, if we originally had just one Varroa mite come in and then somehow you skipped all the century hives and you landed bang in the middle of Newcastle, the Varroa is going to get into the hive, it's going to find its way into underneath the brood capping, it's going to lay an egg, that's the female Varroa mite. That egg is going to hatch into a male, it's going to mate with itself, Varroa is incestuous, and then because of the 21-day brood cycle of your worker bee, there's only enough time for Varroa to typically lay one egg. So from your female Varroa mite, you go from 1 to 2, okay? So because originally that you've only got that one Varroa mite that comes in, it will typically take at least 18 months, but probably more like 2 years before it actually builds up the numbers to overwhelm the hive. Okay, bear in mind that it's only when you've got one Varroa mite getting into the hive, so it's quite a slow process. Okay, so your queens can actually outstrip easily the pace of Varroa when you're not having reinfestation come in. Now, how it actually kills the hive is through spreading of viruses. Okay, so there is probably 5 really serious viruses, and there is more than that. At the moment, Australia only really has about 4 of the serious ones. So far, we don't have the deformed wing viruses, which is one of the serious ones. However, there are still 4 other viruses that will kill your hive. They'll kill the hive. So, if you are going through and what Varroa is doing is when it's in its breeding phase below the brood capping, the Varroa are feeding on the larvae. So the bees have got these lipid profiles or fat profiles below them, and the Varroa is feeding off of that. Okay? When they're piercing that outer exoskeleton of the bee, that's how the viruses are getting in. Now, if you go back to that example of one Varroa mite being below the brood capping, by the latter stage you might have 4 or 5 Varroa per cell within there. Okay, so and have you all seen roughly the size of a Varroa mite compared to a bee? It's around the size of a sesame seed. You've got 5 of those on a bee, it's very, very serious. Okay, so the viral load that builds up over time is what kills the bee through the spreading of viruses. What happens is the bee emerges from the cell and it basically thinks that it's sick. Okay, when you actually see a hive that is sick from Varroa that's got parasitic mite syndrome, the bees will come out and they're moving very, very slow. They're not busy, they're not active, and they don't go about their normal role. Quite often they'll just fly away and go to die, or they'll actually just drift to other colonies, and that's how the Varroa sort of spreads throughout your apiary. Okay? So that's kind of a rough rundown of the biology of Varroa and how it actually kills the hive. Okay? Any questions on that? No? Cool. What I've just described is probably more of a phase that we would call the chronic phase in New Zealand. So there's 2 major phases to this thing. Newcastle right now is in the acute phase, and then what we're going to transition to over the next 5 years will be the chronic phase. Alright, so if there's something you need to remember from this talk, it's an important point, it is the acute and chronic phase. The acute phase is when all of the feral colonies, the wild colonies around you, are dying off, okay, which you've all probably heard about. At the moment in Newcastle, there's definitely been feral colonies that are dying off. I'm also aware of a load of bees that has already been killed by Varroa. And the reinfestation rate that's actually coming in after treating, so after an 8-week treatment of bay Varroa, is about 30 mites per day. In New Zealand, when that was measured, that went up to 80 mites per day in certain areas. Okay, so in this scenario, we've just got 1 going to 2 when you've got the initial Varroa mite coming in. If you've got 30 per day, and you're in that initial acute phase when all the wild bees are dying off, you can easily get over 200 mites for the week. And you think of a 21-day brood cycle, that's doubling every 3 weeks, plus the additional varroa that are coming in every single day. So to put it another way, the first couple of years are going to be a little bit of a fight for you, because you are going to constantly get reinfestations if you're in areas that have high amounts of feral colonies. Now, Australia is a fantastic beekeeping country, produces an enormous amount of honey, and there are parts of Australia where there has been measured over 100 feral colonies per square kilometre of bush, okay? If they all start dying off at the same time, all those worker bees that are emerging, they start drifting back into your hives, you must up your monitoring level for the first 2 years. Basically what I'm trying to get across is, just because you've treated in the first couple of years, don't sort of sit back and relax. Like, you will be able to in future years. Continue to monitor. You must continue to test if you're in areas that have high amounts of feral hives. Okay, so that's kind of this branch that I want to sort of put over the top of the acute phase of this. It's really important to up your monitoring once you do eventually get it. Okay. Questions around that? Yes.
Oh, so you said that have been killed by Varroa in New South Wales now. Were they killed with a disease?
They must have been, basically. Yes.
But we don't know what disease?
No. And to be honest, to sort of do that, you have to do genetic testing. Yeah, as well. Yeah. You know, an experienced beekeeper might, in New Zealand, might pick up exactly what it was, but you have to get it basically as it dies off. If you have a hive that actually dies of Varroa, you find very little. Everything's more or less generally rocked out. You might have a pile of bees sort of on the bottom of the hive, and it'll essentially be empty. You sort of go, what's happening? And typically that's a Varroa. Yes.
What's an effective monitoring rate in terms of hives per apiary and frequency to give you reliable information to treat them?
So the more the merrier, in all honesty.
Every week or every month? Or?
Oh no, I mean, okay, so my crew, there was 3 of us. We managed 1,800 colonies, which is a lot. So roughly, if you're going on sort of a 4 to 6 week cycle, what I was always told was to learn to love your drone comb. So when you've got your 21-day brood cycle, and then you've got the additional 4 days for your drone comb, that gives the Varroa mite extra time to lay more eggs and they hatch out. So for all of you guys that are already in your brood nests regularly, the more often you're in there, just check your brood comb flat out, and then of course you can go through it and you'll pick up Varroa earlier than what you will with alcohol washes. Alcohol washes are great and they're the best way to get a really accurate reading of Varroa, but if you want to pick up really low numbers, Varroa are blind, so they are essentially attracted to drone comb. We don't necessarily know why, but they very much know the difference between the two because they can breed faster in it. So they will go straight for the drone comb given the choice if it's the right time of year. So yeah, I mean, if you can do, and this does vary in New Zealand as well. There are guys in New Zealand that never do an alcohol wash, ever. They just go through, but our seasons are very regulated, so we can just treat 3 times per year at the same time of year and we're okay. Whereas there's guys that will regularly do alcohol washes. They'll do 10 to 20% of their hives, and they'll do that probably once every 2 months. But I would probably aim to do more than that if you can over the first couple of years once you start seeing the feral colonies die off. So to be so vague, but it varies a lot. Any other questions? Around biology, how it kills the hive, understand acute and chronic phases.
So I've just got one quick one. So once the feral hives have died out,
Yep.
they're obviously going to come to the commercial side of things.
Yes.
But then once you get that, if you can get them under control,
Yep.
then you should be
Yeah, you still can get mite bombs, but they're typically from other beekeepers rather than feral colonies. So if you've got other beekeepers that are within 3 or 4 kilometres of your hive, or even sometimes further away, you can get mite. So if they let their varroa mites get too high, and you've just treated and you've done your alcohol washes, but then you come back in 6 weeks and you go, why are my mite levels so high? This shouldn't be the case. Typically, you'd have by a mite bomb. So we don't actually know exactly. They think it's from drones because they're really good flyers, and in the same token, because Varroa targets them, they're a very good vector for Varroa to actually spread. So they'll fly to other colonies. So if you know the areas, and a lot of beekeepers in New Zealand, they have extremely good record keeping, and they know the areas where they're going to get Varroa, and sometimes they'll just avoid it because there's other beekeepers in the area that aren't treating and aren't keeping their levels low. So it still can definitely happen even once you're into that chronic phase. It just depends on the other beekeepers that are around you. Yeah, yes.
Mechanism of transfer,
Yes.
you're saying that the infection starts from the breed.
Yes.
So once that adult bee hatches out and is moving amongst the hive,
Yep.
can it transfer onto other bees and e.g. the queen as well? Or?
Yeah, they don't tend to affect the queen quite so much, but that's called the dispersal phase. So once they actually emerge, and it's literally called the dispersal phase, they go around, they can transfer to other bees, they fly out, that's exactly how they spread. Yeah. Yes.
So robbing, like bees robbing would be a major source of spread, wouldn't it?
Once it actually dies, yeah, they'll just hatch right. Yeah.
But even if from apiaries a couple of k's away,
Yeah. Yes.
it'd be a problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Very-
Yeah. Any sort of apiary where you're close, you sort of, ideally you want to, which is sort of what beekeepers do, and I know this is extremely difficult, but even if all you beekeepers have your differences, you can have people that do their operation this way, and then you can have your people that do their operation this way, and that's completely fine, have your differences, but in the middle where those circles cross should be your varroa management. So if you can sort of semi-communicate with the people, if you know you're in the area and you can time your treatments, that can really help everybody out. Yeah. Any more questions on biology or how it kills hives? Okay, just on that, before I move on, is everyone confident on how to do an alcohol wash? Can I see a show of hands? Do I need to cover it? Everyone's pretty good with that? Yeah, okay. So alcohol washing, just briefly, it is the industry standard for getting an accurate reading of the number of varroa mites in there. Within your sheets on the front page, there is a table on the front that is come from the industry. This does vary at the moment, they keep changing it. Generally speaking, about getting 5 varroa mites per wash in New Zealand, I start to worry, and that for me is sort of immediate treatment. I saw a wash on Friday in Campbelltown, which is about 45 minutes out of Sydney, and that had 40 mites in the wash. And there are other reports around Newcastle of 100 mites per wash. So the reason for that is the whole of Australia over the next few years will be in this honeymoon phase, essentially. So your hives are going to be able to handle much higher levels of varroa. You're going to have than what you'd typically be able to. The reason for that is because your viral load hasn't built up. So you're in this sort of phase where you're going to be, oh, my bees have got varroa, I've got really high numbers coming through in my washes, my bees are completely normal. And it'll come to a stage once that viral load builds up, and within 3 weeks, if you don't treat, you come back and the entire apiary will be lost. So that won't happen, bear in mind, if you don't let your numbers of varroa build up. Okay, in New Zealand, for that to happen, when it initially came over, people were getting around 30,000 mites per hive before it actually collapsed. So beekeepers came back after winter and they had collapsed because they hadn't actually treated. If you test and treat and you have a very good indication of your varroa mite levels, you'll be fine. Then when I moved to Australia, I had no idea about beetle or how to manage it. I lost hives from beetle, I learned, and now I'm okay. Right. Varroa is just very normal for me. I've just grown up with it. It's not necessarily something to be scared of. It's just, you just have to respect it. Right? Just test and treat. Any questions? Before I move on to the actual treatments themselves? Okay. Okay, so you'll hear this from a lot of other talks and stuff as well, but it's referred to as integrated hive management. So that is what they're really referring to, is using a range of different treatments for a really good result. So I'll break up the treatment options. So you've got your synthetic or your chemical options, you've got your organic options, and then you've got your passive controls or mechanical controls, things like baseboards and drone combs. And then sort of I'll put as a separate category, which will be your queens and genetics. Okay. So if you have a look, so this is what I wanted you to have a look at this. So by the way, this front sheet is here. This is something I've got. This is something I've made. So if you follow this, you go through this, and you go through, you check your drone comb, do your alcohol washes, use your mite table, and then select your treatment. All right, that's the whole reason for it. The actual next 4 sheets after that are the treatment instructions that come with the packets of it. I've just blown them up so you can get used to it, pass it on to your staff. But keep going through that. And you'll get the table of active ingredients for Varroa. You'll find that one? Okay, so this is the list of approved treatments or under permit through that are available presently in Australia and New South Wales. The ones that are highlighted are the ones available through Ecrotek. There are different versions available on the market, which I've included on here because I want to talk about rotation. So the ones available through Ecrotek at the moment are Apitraz, Varroa and Formic. They are all from 3 separate groups of chemicals. I'm going to talk about Varroa first, which is the one at the middle, and then below that you'll see another one called Apistan. They are slightly different chemicals. You'll see flumethrine and calflumetrinate. Those chemicals are not exactly the same, but they are sisters. So when I start talking about rotations of treatments, you can't rotate between these 2 treatments, all right? The rotation between them is through the separate ones on the actual table, all right? So don't rotate through the ones that are actually within one section. So Varroa itself, and I do want to talk briefly about this, is picking this up from a hand like this, you should not do. Okay? So when I go to put these in a hive, now this isn't going to kill me, I can touch and stuff, but if I'm handling these all day, I don't want to go off and eat my lunch. Okay? You will get very, very used. They're very difficult to put in leather gloves on. Okay, so you want to have synthetic nitrile gloves, latex gloves, have packs of 100 of them or more just within your truck. You'll get used to it. And pretty much any time you're putting these in, they're very difficult to put in. Apitraz is even harder to put in if you've got leather gloves on. Okay, so because you need the dexterity just to actually put them in like this. Now, these things react with heat. So what that means is you all need to start thinking about storage. So when Ecrotek sends all of these treatments out, we send them out with ice packs. There is a variance within this, but Varroa and Apitraz all need to be stored below 25 degrees. So if you go and see commercial guys, you go and spend $1,800 or $2 grand on a box of Varroa, and it arrives and you leave it on the back of the ute on the truck and it gets hot. What can happen after a couple of days is the stuff starts releasing inside the packet. You open it up, you get hit with a bit of a smell. This stuff is designed to release slowly within the hive, so make sure you store it correctly. Okay, so if it's going to be really hot days, if you've got a really hot shed, get yourself a beer fridge, throw it in there. If you're going to be on the road for more than a week, and you're going to be treating hives, get yourself a 12-volt fridge or the like to keep it in your truck. Because these treatments obviously cost money. There are cases in New Zealand where people have gone, hey, these haven't actually worked, but they haven't stored them correctly and they've released the packet first. Okay? So think about storage and think about handling with these things. So latex gloves, nitrile gloves, storage, very, very important. Below 25 degrees always. So as I said, these things are, try and show this. Don't worry.
Just a quick one on that. If it does let go of the bag and you do get it with the bag, like, is that harmful to you? Like, is it an issue?
Wouldn't wanna do
Like
it.
health and safety side of things?
No, you wouldn't want to do it every day. No, there's no warnings on the packets about it or anything, you'll just smell it.
Yeah.
Just to add to that though, and I don't want to speculate, sorry Ron, I'm hiding down here. That, what you just asked Josh, is probably one of the reasons why Oxalic is still going through the whole process at the moment.
Yeah.
That product, as well as formic acid, which is Formic Pro, it is quite potent when that does happen, to the point where we had a bucket get pierced in a shipping container. In a 20-foot shipping container, one bucket, you open the doors and you know about it. So that, particularly oxalic acid, beekeepers have been bowled over out in the field by, unfortunately, getting a guts full, and that's that. So
Very much so. So your strips like this, so as I said, they react with heat, and your hives are at a very nicely consistent 37 degrees, which you all should know. So your strip placement should look roughly like this. You want them to be in the centre of the brood nest. So your synthetic strips like this, your Epitraz, your Epistan, your Baby Roll, all work in the same way that they work by contact. Okay, so what that means is the bees have to brush past them or get very, very close to it, and there is, that some people say they move the chemical around a little bit as well, but they actually have to physically move past it. So it's very, very important that you use the full number of strips, that you don't be tempted to actually halve it, and you go for the full treatment length. That does vary at the moment based on the permits. The structures within these things, because they come from New Zealand, won't necessarily match what's on the permits at the moment. Okay, but Baby Roll is generally an 8-week treatment in New Zealand. Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of people in New South Wales at the moment saying that they're going to do this. That happened in the US, and the treatments only lasted for about 4 years before the efficacy wore off. Okay, so don't be tempted to try and save your money, you will ruin it for everyone. Okay, use the full treatment, use it for the full treatment length, put it in the centre of the hive. Don't do things like this either, that's also unnecessary. Don't line them up around the cooler parts of the hive. Okay. All of these treatments are without honey supers on. That is always best practice for Baby Roll and Epitraz and all of the synthetic chemicals. Okay, Epitraz presently has international standards for treatments. They're not testing for Epitraz itself. It breaks down to 2 opposing chemicals, which they test for. Capilano and everybody else has been testing for these things for years. It is enormously difficult to get to that threshold, to get the chemicals to that level. They're very, very safe to use. Okay.
You say treat with the supers on, is it?
No, with all of the synthetic chemicals you can't treat with supers on, so you have to knock them off. So that's, I don't know South Australian beekeeping very well, but that might be enormously difficult for you.
So in springtime, like if you had to drop down to a single,
Yeah.
I mean, the bees would physically fit it into a single.
Yes, so if
If
you
they sat there for 8 weeks, you wouldn't get the
That-
and you've only treated after these.
exactly, and they would have been in the trees. So with the likes of Baby Roll, that is 4 strips per brood box. If you're treating 2 brood boxes, you're doubling the treatment. For me, my personal plan would be, I would probably over winter, a couple of brood boxes, I'd reduce them 4 weeks out from almonds, get a really grunty box, put my treatments in for 4 weeks, put them onto almonds, and get the strips out box night as fast as I can. That's my personal plan, because out of these 2, one that I would argue would be the stronger treatment would be Epitraz, so I would use something like that. In New Zealand, you have this thing called, we have this emergency clause, which isn't in Australia. So they say that you can use Baby Roll in an emergency with supers on, i.e. if your hive is going to die. So that we've sort of got that variance there in New Zealand to actually keep it on. We don't presently have something like that in Australia. However, Rod Berg, who was very open about this, there was a hive, there was a treatment level in Newcastle, they threw Baby Roll strips with 2 supers on top. Very high levels of varroa mites came back 6 weeks later, and the hive was grunty. Brood pattern was awesome. They do work extremely well. Questions around synthetic strips? Yes.
Just with the no supers,
Yeah.
is there anywhere in US or New Zealand, is there anything like a treatment super that beekeepers have that they only use, they chuck it on,
Yes.
so they've got that room,
Yeah.
that they never harvest it or whatever?
Yeah, there's guys in Australia right now that have said that that's going to be their plan. Essentially, that they'll have like a WSP or an ideal or even a full depth if you wanted to, and yeah, they'll throw that on for when and just throw it in the freezer or something afterwards once they're done blowing.
Build a big shed.
Yeah, I would encourage you though, however, to try and get your treatments correct, that you don't sort of have to go down that road because it's just the amount of labour with it. It's a really good thing to do if you've got the numbers to do it. Yes.
Can you overdose the treatments, or is it just a waste of product? And if you have used them, especially in the early stages, is there something where you need to declare that you have used them as far as pre-sale of honey?
Yeah, so I believe with Capilano, if you've used any of these treatments, certainly in New Zealand you would 100% do. If you use any of these products, I think even in New South Wales, if you're selling your honey, you do have to declare it as well. It's on the form to Capilano. What was the other question, sorry?
Can you overdose, or is it just a waste of product?
So there's a big study done on Traz, and I think they overdid it by 5 or 10 times. They threw about 20 strips in. They found that even that didn't exceed the threshold of whatever it does in honey. Bear in mind that was on virgin honey, so these chemicals build up over time. It might take 4 or 5 years for the levels to actually build up, but off a one-off treatment.
And did that have a better effect on the mite?
No, absolutely none. Yeah, yeah. So putting 10 in versus 2. So basically, just to reiterate, stick to the instructions. Yeah, there is no difference. But there is no difference between using 2 strips versus 10 strips for the likes of Ecrotek, which is another study. However, there is a big difference if you treat a single brood box, which is really strong, and you use half the treatment. Yeah, you'll build up resistance. Yes.
What's the cost per hive treatment?
It varies. So, Jacob, do you want to answer that? You probably know better than me.
Thanks, mate. So at present time, obviously depending on quantity, you're looking at about $7 to $9 per hive. Depending on, these things are tradable commodities, chemical at the end of the day. It may get up to 12, but long term, as this thing develops in Australia, and we all know with greater supply and greater demand, pricing comes down. So yeah, we expect it to probably settle around the $7 mark at this stage.
Probable number of treatments per year?
Well, that's the $1
That's the
million
year.
question.
Oh,
That's
okay.
you might honestly, it might be 3 times a year.
Yeah, New Zealand's standard is 3 times a year. Over here in parts along the coast of New South Wales and Queensland, I'd expect it to be much higher than that, particularly in that initial phase. Yes.
So, interchanging frames from the brood box to the honey super,
Not ideal.
not ideal.
Yep.
So, if we want to remove frames out of the brood box to replace them,
For what purpose? Like just to get rid of them and melt them down? Or?
oh, that's our husband. We do it every. We do it every. We replace 3 frames in our hold every year.
Yeah.
In the brood box. We lift them up. They're still good, so we use them for honey supers. But
Yeah, I think the concentrations of the honey, because there is, like with the likes of Ecrotek, there is a withholding period of 2 weeks once you pull it out before you can actually put honey supers on, ideally. I don't have an exact answer for you, to be perfectly honest, as to whether that, I've never been asked that before. In New Zealand, I dare say that they would just lift it up and kind of ignore it. But yeah, that's sort of one of those questions that I haven't actually been asked before. It's sort of a question I might need sort of some government advice on in the future as to whether that's even allowed. Yeah.
well, yeah, it's part of our husbandry. So
Exactly. It's standard in New Zealand to rotate out those frames every 4 years, but we did lift up honey from there regularly. We did chop and change it every now and then when we're splitting and things. Yeah.
It's tricky when they choke up with honey.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I was basically going to ask, so if they have honey in the bottom, and then say, well, you might be treating, but they're still going to be collecting honey.
Yeah.
is there, then you wait however long, if they've collected it and they've had that chemical mixed in the bottom, and then you super them up and they move it up top, is there a risk that there's still going to be chemical in that honey?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there is.
So I assume you can clear
Very,
that.
very low concentrations. As long as you're declaring it, like the standard of it is very well known and stuff. And if you don't have these strips in the hive when you've got supers on, you're not going to meet the threshold. Like it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Yes.
So you take the super off because you don't want the honey to be contaminated.
Yes.
So the honey that's in the bottom box, when you take that out, what do you do with it?
Don't eat it.
Don't eat it, don't sell it, don't extract it.
Oh look,
How do you get rid of it?
ideally, in an ideal route, like we all know that we're going to have to rotate out this range at some point. We'll get rid of it. And it's probably more about the legal concentrations you're allowed within your IBCs. Okay, so if you're doing a little bit, it's not going to be an issue.
And if you sit with them for so long, does it dissipate?
Yes, it does break down. Yeah, Epidraz in particular is quite quick. Varroa is harder to test for. Yeah, but that's why there is a threshold for these things. Because in reality, there is going to be these chemicals in your honey moving forward to a certain level. Okay, there's established international levels for this. Because there's, you need to rotate through your frame sometimes. Yeah.
So if you're not physically moving it up yourself,
Yep.
bees will do it anyway, especially after you come out of almonds.
Yes.
Is that
It's
any
not,
advice on that?
not really. You just can't get away from it.
Normally you aim to get them first, so
Yeah.
that they don't waste time.
Yeah.
But that's unavoidable as well.
Basically, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not like these standards are really low or anything like that. They understand that you can't get a zero number of chemicals in your honey. Yeah. Any more questions on things?
Yeah, I might have it wrong. When I take my honey off
Yep.
and I put it in the mitis tubes, it's 2-3 weeks before I can put a honey super back on.
Epidraz with holding period is 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah. Overall, I'd have to check, but it's not that long. It's not as long.
Thanks.
Yeah. Generally speaking, when I think of the two treatments, I think of Epidraz as the stronger treatment. Yes.
Can you get effective Varroa treatment not using synthetics, but using all the other methods available?
I'll cover that in a minute, actually. Yeah. Okay, if there's any more questions around synthetics, I'll answer them at the end. I'll just keep it going. So I want you to get the idea of rotation and why that's really important. Everyone talks about rotation, you very rarely hear why. So you have this thing called method of action. Every chemical, whether it's synthetic or if it's organic, affects the varroa mite in a different way. I mean, it kills it in a different way. So if I put Varroa strips in a hive and it's 99% effective, I'm happy with my alcohol washes, works really well, but I have a few varroa mites left that perhaps have some slight resistance to it or didn't get the full dose of the chemical so they didn't die, it's important that you rotate to a different chemical on the table, okay? The reason for that is because you're targeting a different part of the varroa mite. Might be its mouthpiece, might be its pads, it could be its membrane, something like that. Okay, and that then kills those leftover mites so they can't build up resistance. So that's why we actually rotate through them, because we're going for a different method of action according to the chemical or the organic acid that we're using. Right? So it's extremely important. On that, so in New Zealand, beekeepers are extremely good, or commercial beekeepers are generally very, very good with reporting. It's sort of not like Australia. We're quite happy to report on hive losses and which varroa treatments that they're treating with every single year. There is a group of beekeepers that are organic, of course. On average, they are losing around 40% of their hives by only treating with organics at the moment. The average at the moment in New Zealand, if they're using one synthetic and one organic, is sort of between 20 and 30% at the moment. The magic number at the moment is 2 synthetics and 1 organic. Bear in mind in New Zealand you're allowed to use oxalic acid. Okay, that is presently keeping hive losses to around 10%, which is industry standard wise right across the world is fairly normal. You can have that on a badge year with your queens. Okay, it's actually basically the same. Even before Varroa came to New Zealand, people would lose 10% of their hives all the time. It wasn't a big deal. Okay, so that magic number is 2 synthetics and 1 organic on rotation, based on the data coming out of New Zealand on hive losses and actual treatments being used. Right?
Could you damage the eyes or anything like that of the bees if you overdose with some of those acidic chemicals?
Oh, look, in reality, none of this stuff is good for bees. It's less deadly for bees. Some of formic acid, for example, kills a lot of bees. Okay, so the synthetic strips don't kill many, and they will typically affect. If you do it when you actually slot it in and you accidentally press it against the brood, it'll kill the brood directly behind it. But the synthetics are generally very well tolerated. You won't notice a lot of difference in your bees or anything. You'll look at them and you'll be like, oh, look at the bee. I know people talk a lot about chemicals and how bad they are, and yes, they are bad, and it's a shame that we can't do that anymore. But they're very, very safe. Okay. So the number one selling treatment at the moment is formic acid, because you can use it with Superzon. All right. There is anecdotal evidence at the moment that NOD, so the makers of formic acid, that is also killing viruses within the hives, and they have brought on an additional scientist right now to actually study that. How it works, you will have, and I don't have examples here because I don't want to open up for obvious reasons, but they actually work best when you've got Superzon. You don't generally want to use it when you've got a single box of bees, and if you do, you actually want to add a box on top. So it's 2 pads, don't double it. If you double Formic Pro, you will kill the hive. You can also underdose it as well. It also has a temperature variance. Okay, you must use it between 15 and 29 degrees. There's 2 pads that you'll slap on top, underneath or below the excluder, it does not matter. If you go outside that temperature variance and you go over that, you get what's called a flash. So a formic acid treatment is 7 days, and it's got this composite, what they've done a very good job of is slowing down the release of formic over those 7 days. Most of it is released in the first 3 days though. So the first 3 days in terms of your temperature variance are the most important. So when you're asking about treating through summer and stuff, if you have a cooler patch of weather and you know it's going to be 20 or 25 degrees, which sometimes happens through summer, and you know you're going to get 3 days, you can use formic. It is fine to use. You just need those 3 days. That's the most important bit, with the lower amount of formic being released over the other one, over the rest of the period. Okay. So how it works is when it's actually being released, the bees don't like it very much at all. The common misconception around organics at the moment is you think of an organic treatment, you think, oh, it's organic, it must be good, it must be really, really gentle. The stuff is extremely strong. Okay. Even at the end of the treatment, at the end of the 7 days, if you go to pick this stuff up with your bare hands, you pick it up, you'll notice once you get back into your car, your skin will be missing a little bit. Okay, it's very, very strong. Wear gloves. Okay, if you look at the instructions, you should also be wearing goggles as well. As Jacob mentioned before, you will only do it once, where you open it up near your face and you do this and open it up. Okay, you'll get very used to doing this. Okay, it's very, very strong. Okay. It's organic acid, so you don't have to wear a respirator or anything. It's not like that. I'm just warning you like that. So you've got 2 pads that you put over the top. You want to have a super on it, and the reason for that is the bees actually move away from it and they fan the formic acid around it. Okay, so you're not only targeting the bees that are on the outside. Formic acid is really good because it kills the varroa mite below the cell capping as well. Now, it may not necessarily kill them straight away, it can also just damage them. So if you do, when you're doing your alcohol washes, say post-treatment, to see how effective it is, you don't want to do it immediately after those 7 days. You want to give it at least 14 days after that period. Now, formic acid will kill bees. Okay, if you put formic acid, you'll quite often see bearding, particularly on your stronger hives. You'll see bearding right out the front because they are fanning the formic acid through. You can easily get 300 to 1,000 dead bees at the front. If you imagine the varroa piercing the sides of the insect, the formic acid can then get into them and can kill them. So you have all those weaker bees that have been pierced by Varroa, they then die and they get dragged out the front. Will also probably stop your queen from laying for 3 to 7 days afterwards as well. You will probably have some queen attrition as well. The rep from Nod is quite convinced that that is weeding out your queens that have that are older or weaker or have a lower amount of queen pheromones being passed around. So because you're actually having formic acid being passed around, it's getting rid of those lower amounts of formic acid and it's triggering a supersedure response. So if you're using formic acid, and you can time it with throughout the year when you're actually replacing the queens, it's a really good thing. Okay, so you can expect some queen attrition there, but also you shouldn't stress out if you come to the end of the treatment at 7 days and your queen hasn't started laying. Just put it in there, leave it alone for a couple of weeks, or if you're commercial, leave it alone for 6 weeks. The nice thing about formic acid is you don't have to be back at the end of the 8 weeks to pull it out. They are organic, you can take them off, you can throw them in your compost bin. Okay, they're really, really good in that sense. You don't have to be back immediately to actually pull the things off. Alright? So very different to the synthetic strips in terms of actual treatments, and very good because you can use it with Superzone. That was not around when I was in New Zealand when I was beekeeping. It is a silver lining for you guys. You do have such a wide variety of treatments available to you. Questions on formic?
Sorry, I've got one.
Yeah.
We put a mat in between our honey systems.
Yeah.
Would that be advisable or not?
Can they get around it?
They can get around it, you've got a gap, a couple of inches in front of it,
I imagine it would stop some of the efficacy a little bit.
so that'd be preferable not to.
Yeah, I've never been asked that before, but anything that's going to block it being passed around, I don't think would be good.
So we,
Yeah.
So when you said about the temperature being very, it working or not being able to breathe in,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter what the hive keeps its temperature at, like?
No, so I got asked this one other time as well. If the temperature on the outside of the box through here is cooler, they're wanting ideally the temperature around the outside of this area to be correct as well. Like if you've got a really cold area on the outside here, which passes onto the outside, it really affects the treatment. Likewise for hot weather as well. And the main thing with the hot weather is if you go over that, it gives a flash treatment, so you'll have all of the formic acid release in like the first day. Yeah, but with the cooler weather, it's basically because you end up with that sort of cool patch around it.
Just started touching on this, so common sense would say you'd be looking to use your organics coming into a honey flow, so you're not missing that withholding period.
Yeah.
Are there the synthetics, all the different chemicals target the mite in different ways. So like if you've got higher brood, you're targeting brood Varroa, or if you've got Varroa on bees, is some of the chemicals targeted on bees. So what considerations are time of year and type of treatment?
I would keep formic acid up your sleeves for any time of the year that's kind of moderate in temperature. I'd be using your Vaporol or your Apitraz through your winter and cooler months. One of the considerations around synthetic treatments with strips is that all of the Varroa mites are exposed on the outside, i.e. if you introduce a brood break, or you remove your queen for a period of time, or you cage your queen for a period of time, or you drop a cell in and you get rid of your queen, so all of the brood can hatch out, all of those mites are then exposed on the outside, and the synthetics can work basically to their full degree. So and that's why it's that full treatment. If you are using that in a full brood period, it's because you want those 6 weeks of all the mites hatching out and getting in contact. Sounds sufficient?
Do they become resistant to it?
Slowly over time, there is resistance, particularly in the likes of Europe with Apitraz. Yes, the resistance is actually remarkably low if you use the treatment to the correct length of time and you use them on rotation. These things are still working well in New Zealand and it's been there for decades.
Talking about the rotation, rotate the three, is that important? You can't use sort of one, then the other one, and then the other one, and then go back to the one you haven't used, sort of? Does it need to be sort of consistently the three different treatments all the time?
Ideally, I think you're going to be treating more than 3 times a year. Initially, you're not going to get away from it. If you can sort of make it so you were doing like, this one and then organic, and then you're using Ecrotek, say, in autumn, and you're sort of breaking up between those chemicals, that would be ideal. Whether that's going to be a reality for you guys, I have no idea. But yeah, if you can sort of break it up, then that's great. Yes.
So just follow on that, so you could use Ecrotek, then go to Formic Pro,
Yeah.
then back to Varroa, and then back to Formic Pro,
Yes.
and then back to Ecrotek. So you use that organic
Yes.
every second,
It's like a break.
and then rotate your 2 synthetics out.
Absolutely. So Formic Pro is kind of unique in that it actually has, the reason that it doesn't have resistance, or there has been no proven resistance to Formic Pro at the moment, is because it has multiple method of actions. They're not actually 100% sure on how it works. It's actually quite difficult to study. But yes, it kills the mite in various different ways, which is why it's a really effective treatment. Yes,
Is Formic Pro the only one that can penetrate the wax capping?
presently, yes. Yeah. Good questions on Formic? I'll make sure I cover everything. Yeah, so I've noted down here, it kills up to 98% in that dispersal phase, which is all the varroa on the outside, and then 80% below the brood cap. So it's very effective because it interrupts that breeding cycle so effectively. For your other question as well, you want at least 1 month gap between Formic treatments. So if you're going to use Formic twice in a row, you want to give it 4 weeks at least. Covered the effect on the bees and the queens. Right. Okay, so we've covered quite a lot of ground. I'm going to switch into passive and mechanical controls. There was a study done in Europe with drone cappings, as I was saying before. The varroa mite targets the drones, and they go in because they can breed up faster. There's an organic study done where varroa was controlled completely, only using drone frames. So basically what that means is they put a drone frame in the centre of the brew box, they pull it out, and they freeze it or heat it up and kill the varroa mite. I would stress that it was only just, and I wouldn't expect a huge amount of honey, but if there's anyone with organic surge or anything like that, there might be times of year on the likes, maybe almonds or maybe canola, where you've got your bees grouped fairly well together, and you might be able to get around all your bees faster. It might be effective for you just as a passive control to keep your numbers down. So when I say passive, I tend to think of it as something that won't control all of your varroa mites or get them down to a really low manageable level. You can think comfortably. It's just something that keeps that not sort of as a bit of a knockdown. Okay. So there is a study on that. You can find it online. It's quite interesting. Now, basically everyone in New Zealand uses some variation of this. Some people build it into their pellets. Some people obviously buy our mesh base or screen bottom board. That is that passive and mechanical control. So within this book here, there is a section on it. When the varroa mite emerges from the wax capping, about 20% of those, for one reason or another, fall to the ground. Okay, they'll go to latch onto a bee, or they fall off the wax capping and they literally fall down. Now, varroa mite evolved with the Africanized bee, and they have natural hygienic behaviour, meaning that they can detect that they've got the varroa mite on them and they can brush them off. If you think about where an Africanized bee might live, or if you're underneath a rock ledge, or if you're in a tree and they brush it off, what's going to happen to the varroa? It's going to fall to the floor, it's going to fall to the forest floor. It's blind, it has no ability to get back on the bee. A mesh base like that essentially just copies that. Okay, so if the varroa mite falls to the floor, it falls through the mesh. They do not like cold weather. They do not like any sort of chilling at all. Or if you've got any sort of sticky board, any sort of oil, or just about any sort of tray, or even if you have the trays out, that will kill the varroa. Okay, So if you happen to be lucky enough, and most of you will not, to have any sort of hygienic behaviour on your bees, or if you just have natural mite drop, it's really good to have a screened bottom board. Okay, it's just one of those things that just keeps the mite levels lower. And yes, the previous operation I was with, every single hive had that. If you think about it, and you've got a flat bottom, and then the varroa can fall to the floor, and you think about the number of bees that are on there, it's very easy for the varroa to then latch a ride with the bees again. Okay. Probably last one I'll mention is splitting. If you've got really high levels of mites and you split a hive in two, you just halve the numbers of varroa. So if you're going through your treatments and you're on canola and you're about to split, if you split your hives, you halve the numbers of varroa, and you already automatically just made a single because you've made a split, and then you put your varroa treatments in while you're splitting and you're allowing the queen to build up. You've got a very effective treatment for your bees. Okay, so all of that, particularly if you're using cells as well, you're making a split, you're dropping your cell in, you're putting your bay varroa strips in. Okay, so splitting can be an effective way to halve your numbers if you combine it with going with your singles. Okay, that is passive. Any questions around that? Should we rush through that? Yes.
If you're splitting into a nuke, then you're obviously knocking down your numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on that sheet as well, but the numbers of strips that you use for a nuke, I think 5-frame nuke, you're using 2 of these, 5-frame nuke from Amphitrite is using 1. Formic Pro is not a particularly good treatment for nukes. It's one of the downsides. They don't have the numbers of bees to actually fumigate the Formic Pro around, and it tends to knock them and can kill them a lot easier, even if you use half a pad. Yes?
You were talking about the drone cone there. Now, some of the boats I've got, they will build that drone cone along the bottom of the cone.
Yeah.
I was thinking that was going to be a bad thing because that's where they'll breed. That could be a good thing if when I go through, cut all that off, get rid of it.
Yeah, assuming you can get to it before it hatches.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're going to use a drone frame, you could potentially use that.
As long as you get there before it hatches, yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, sometimes you get it underneath the excluded as well.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
I wasn't going to ask this, but seeing you mentioned African bees.
Yes.
I work in Africa, so
Okay.
it's Scutelata.
Yes.
And so you may not know the answer to this question, but African bees abscond a lot.
Yes.
So if I use some of these treatments, am I going to make them abscond, or is it going to work?
I don't know, but I do know that they swarm a lot, and I think that's really interesting because that, again, it halves the varroa number.
They don't, no, it's not so much swarming, they abscond.
Yeah, okay.
So you just have an apiary with 100 hives in it, and then if you talk to them wrong, you'll come back and there'll be 35. The rest have just disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's not like this, you just have empty boxes. So.
No, keep them in Africa. Yes, I don't know. Sorry. Cool. Moving on. We are getting near the end. You keep waiting. Okay, so genetics, queen replacement, queen breaks. So if you are targeting genetics and hygienic behaviour, you need 2 genes basically within your queens. You need basically a pair of them. In New Zealand, you can take a queen clipping and you can send it away to be tested for that. There is the sort of old school way you'll go through and you'll prick around it. There's that new sort of chemical stuff that you can spray on it. You'll come back the next day and you'll see whether the bees have removed the damaged or killed brood. The latest way to do that is just through wing clipping genetic testing. I'm not presently sure whether you can get that done in Australia, but long term for the treatment of varroa, it will be genetics. Bear in mind it's been around decades across the world. You're not aware of huge amounts of bees that actually have the genes to resist varroa. It has happened in New Zealand. My boss managed to get it down to 1 treatment a year, but he lost all of his honey production. Okay, so there's, yes, you can get hygienic bees, but yes, then it drops off your honey production. It can then potentially up your aggression and make it extremely unpleasant. Getting the right mix of gentle, productive bees with the right traits is enormously difficult. So it will do. But if you are a queen breeder, please put a program in place and make it as large as you possibly can. If you've got any left, if you can put aside 50 hives or 100 hives that you can actually actually assess for these traits, and you can buy in queens from across the country, go for it, please do it. It's very, very important work, and we'll support that any way we can. Yeah, I actually covered a lot of splitting, cell dropping, queen confinement, and breaks. We're pretty confident around that. Any other questions? No?
I've only got one. That's I'm just thinking out of the square a bit.
Yep.
So is there any mechanism for that, like this in the honey super?
Yep.
Do the bees, if they're crawled through an excluder,
Yep.
they still got mites on them?
Yes.
So they don't get knocked off going through them?
No, so they go right between like the abdomen. They're typically underneath, but if you look at a varroa mite under a microscope, it's got these hairs, and the hairs are there to actually mimic the hairs on the outside of the bee.
Okay.
So with Apis mellifera, that's
Just go through.
yeah, they can just basically just slot under, and that's how they actually fool the bee, is to not flicking them off. Yeah, so that's why it's so hard to actually sort of get them off. Yeah.
With those ventilated places,
Yep.
how do the New Zealanders, they handle the ants okay with them?
We have very little problem with ants, and that is something you have to consider really. So whether you use them with the trays or not, or lifting it up, even where I am, I don't have a huge.
What are the New South Wales people, how they get on? They usually,
Ants is more of a problem up in Queensland, generally speaking.
we have big problems over here.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have an exact answer other than just using trays, just slot them in, and they'll get them out regardless.
Yeah, sorry.
That's fine.
We use baffle bottoms, so should we change ours to a screened bottom so that
You can
the
modify
lights
it.
can drop through
Yeah, you can literally
to
cut up.
screen to the into the base?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of different designs.
And that'd be some sort of, I'm just thinking we might be able to count how many mites we've got dropped through that screen too.
Yeah, it's
Because they're not dropping onto the ground.
Yeah,
And that will overcome the ant issue.
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say. Using your trays is a good indication of how many mites that you have if you've got them right
That
across.
was just give us an indication.
Just an indication, yeah, but it is not a approved method.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you guys also make those sticky mats to fit in those trays, don't you?
Correct.
Yeah, because I've got a few of them, and I was thinking about like when it hits, obviously you can do that, but
Yeah.
I find really good, like the bottoms are very hairy without anything there. I think it probably cuts a bit cold, you know, with those trays in.
Yeah.
But so then with the sticky mats, then what you use them to, like, because they have the squares on them, and
Yeah.
that's how you count the
Actually
amount,
count,
like.
you can calculate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what DPI in New South Wales do, and they did this to me when I was on almonds, so they'll put sticky mats on the bottom, and then they'll throw bait roll in for 48 hours. The first 48 hours with the treatment is very, very effective for knocking off a large majority of mites. So that's this initial surveillance here, so they can get through a large amount of bees very, very quickly. And the sticky mats are in, and then as you say, that's the surveillance method. Yeah, very, very effective. Yes.
Just want to talk about genetics,
Yep.
the varroa sensitive hygienic behaviour. When you're in Europe, they have been able to limit their treatments with the selection process. Firstly, were they using the Russian Caucasians to achieve that? In New Zealand, I'm interested in that your boss there lost his honey production but got his treatments down, so effectively New Zealand now doesn't have a pool of varroa resistant stock. Would that be correct?
Yeah, the breeding programs are actually, they're not necessarily as professional as they potentially could be.
So there is a chance that varroa resistant stock could be developed in Australia?
Yeah, I think it will eventually. It's just, don't underestimate how long it's going to take. Yeah, it would be the only thing, yeah.
Okay. So the DNA is taken from the queen to me, looking for the two genetic behaviours that are required.
Yes.
So this is the removal of the brood with the varroa on the pupae, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Or even just the test of even removing the pupae altogether because they detect that it's deep below the brood cap.
So that they haven't chased this ankle biting phenomenon?
Not that I know of, no, but there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things like even measuring the middle leg length so that they can get right behind the head and flick the right off, this all sorts of stuff. Yep, yes.
Does Varroa have an acid predecessor?
No, but there is an interesting thing called a pseudo scorpion that you'll see it talked about in New Zealand sometimes if you kill Varroa, but you can't get them in the number of the actual numbers that you need to go through.
What's the, how long does an actual Varroa, adult Varroa live? Naturally, you know?
Have a look in the book, but they hate the cold, is what I will promise you.
So they don't mind the heat, they hate the cold.
No, they're not very good with heat either.
Oh, that's.
Yeah. Okay, last section, then we'll wrap up. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, regarding treatments per year, like our bees just about breed all year round,
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
That just needs more treatments.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the real pain thing for you guys is this is the New Zealand version of Varroa, and I expect in the next 5 years there will be an industry standard for you guys for the Australian version of that. All as I can tell you is what we do in New Zealand, and it's up to you guys to apply it to your own areas based on South Australian beekeeping. So just learn your treatments and learn your testing. Last section, and then we can wrap up and have a snack. So advantages of Varroa. Selling treatments. Yeah, more wages. Okay, what do you think is going to happen when all of the bees die off in the bush?
Honey production goes.
More honey that we can't sell.
Exactly. Full sheds. Full sheds. Okay, so there's a lot of people right now exiting the market. If you are a commercial beekeeper, is the value of your sites in your bees, or in your bees themselves, or is it in the actual sites that you own? It is within the sites. It's very much within the sites. Over the next few years, there will be some of you that will learn your treatments, that will learn your testing, that will know exactly where the good sites are, that will see apiaries come up, that will know where the good honey productions are, and you will take them over. That is exactly what happened in New Zealand. If any of you invest in the stock market, what is the best time to buy? When the market's high or when the market's low?
Down.
When it's down. Exactly when it's down. What is the market doing right now? It is down. Okay. How many of you are actually going to adapt to this and take up the opportunity while you're in the shift right now in order to actually flip this thing on its head and take advantage of it? Okay, that is the thing I'd like you to take away. On that note, something to think about. Is anyone here who use double queeners? More than one queen within the same hive? Yes?
Yeah, as an experimental thing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's done in New Zealand. There's large operations that use double queeners. They see a 60% increase in the yield by using double queeners. There's a lot of variation in how it's done, but if you're having to go through and reassess your entire operation now because of Varroa, if you're having to change gear and that sort of thing, if you're having to look at the likes of mesh bases and learn all these treatments and change things, have extra super boxes, etc., think about how you're going to adapt your situation. If you've got 300 hives and you use a double queener and you do it effectively, you can produce as much honey as someone with 500 hives can produce. Okay, you can have a 60% increase. It is done in New Zealand right now. So adapt and survive. Yes.
With that, does that mean per hive, double queen, double treatment, or will, like say, per strip sort of thing, or are you going to get away with a bit of a...
Depends how you run it, like, because there's the ones that you can do across the side, in which case if you treat them in individual group boxes, you go 1, 2, 3, and then same if you've got the ones that are above it, and you've got 2 group boxes, yeah, you'd be double treatment. But formic acid, there is no double treatment. Formic acid is, it doesn't matter whether you've got a single group box or you've got 4 stack high, the treatment is always the same. Yeah. Yes.
Just assuming, if you're treating a number of apiaries and there's an apiary a kilometre or so away that hasn't been treated and might have high numbers, it's going to be a hindrance, I assume.
Yeah, it just will wreck your day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even in that chronic phase, if you've got someone who's not treating and stuff, you can have a mite bomb, and it's really annoying. But just get the really good beekeepers in New Zealand have very, very good records of what their Varroa levels were per year in certain locations. So I'd highly recommend going to a digital system if you can, just to make it easier so you can go back to your mite
mite bomb, and you've moved location,
Yep.
and you've gone back 5-10 days, what sort of time, and you've got an issue with your neighbour,
Yeah.
what sort of time frame would you say you'd see a mite bomb?
Like within a cycle, like if you come back 4 weeks later to take honey off and you know that you've treated before, and you know you've set them up, you've boxed them up, and you know the trees are looking good, and then you come back and you'll be like, you know, why am I washes, you know, up in the 6s and 7s?
Yeah, so it's going to take a few weeks before you actually see that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you need at least 2 brood cycles. Yes.
Yeah, so you just said 2 queens per hive. Okay, New Zealand. So what is your average kilogram per hive in a good year? Are you going, you know?
Bugger all compared to here.
Okay, so that's, are you 40 kilograms per hive, 50 kilograms per hive, what is it?
It very much varies. On a bad Manuka season, you get almost nothing. On a good Manuka season, I've seen boxes, full depth, 10 frames stacked 4 high, sort of thing. So a really competent season for Manuka might be 60 to 80 kilos. And we target that almost exclusively. The only other option is clover, which allows at the same time.
So that's from 2 queens per hive?
That was single queen. That was single queen.
So you're saying that, so 2 queens per hive in your Manuka season, you're gonna double that?
You could get up to 60%.
So another 100 kilos?
In theory, yeah, exactly. Assuming that the nectar's actually there. Yeah, because you work with populations that much, and then also one of the main benefits is that when your queen starts to crap out, you've got another queen. So even within, if you guys are awesome with your queen replacements and stuff, you will always have 10 or 20% of your queens that are unproductive.
Yeah.
Well, it's just normal beekeeping, right? But if you've got 2 queens like that, you never get that, so you're just really consistent, nice average right across the acres.
Have you found that big operations in New Zealand are less profitable now, or what, the bigger operations or?
It's just a much more settled industry. So it went through a massive learning curve. It went through guys exiting the industry once Varroa came along. It went through a period where the price of clover honey went up to, you know, just, you know, mixed floral bush honey went to $10 a kilo. It went through a phase where hives and nukes and nuke, you know, I think we sold 1,200 nukes when I was there, and we got $300 a pop. You know, but right now the industry's down, you know, in New Zealand. It's just farming goes up. Yes.
So you mentioned that in New Zealand they use digital record keeping. Are there lots of different ones or any that are particularly good?
Oh, look, not everybody uses it. I'm just saying I recommend it. You know, my old supervisor, he used manual, and he had a very good manual system, and he, you know, that's what he used, and it was really good for him. So if that's what works for you, and as long as you've got those records and you can refer to them quickly, and you're not just not adapting for the sake of it, I'm sure you've got a manual system. You know, I'm not bagging that. I'm just saying it is easier sometimes to put it all on your phone, you know, and you're not going to lose a book or a pen or whatever.
So if residue did get into the honey and the honey buyer rings you up and says, I don't want your honey, it's got residue in it,
Yes.
there's no way they can use that honey.
I believe so, yeah. It's just like antibiotic residues.
So they say that it's on its way on a truck back to you and.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's not abnormal. You know, if you've got antibiotic residues in your honey right now, they'll send it back. That's just normal.
Not easy. Much anybody.
There's no antibiotics.
Well, there's some, but not much.
Oh.
But if you leave the honey sitting on the floor for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months,
Yeah, it'll still be there.
it'll still be there in the same level. It won't
Yeah. It is affected by heat, but yes, it'll still be there.
Yeah, heat it up.
All right, I think we're about done. Any more final questions?
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
So beekeepers are really going to have to start liaising with one another, because we're getting pretty close to each other now.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, to see who's treated, if you're treated.
As I said before,
I'm going to treat, I've got the grower.
Yeah, like, seriously, in New Zealand, this is just like everyone, you know, they report everything. No one cares. It's just like, yeah, I've got Varroa, yeah, I've got AFB, yeah, you know, and it's like, they just report it, but everyone has, like, then you have what's called a DECA, which is your disease eradication certificate. Everyone within the commercial hive has to have at least one. You have to be a commercial beekeeper for at least 2 years, and you have to know how to put a sinking lid on it. So you just report on it, you report on it the next year, and if you go, oh, my AFB last year was 2%, now it's 5%, I've got a problem. They'll go, oh, you know something about it, I've got someone with a DECA. Yes, and and then it's like in store.
So can everyone treat at the same time?
Yes.
All
yeah.
within a week?
Yes, I mean,
Yep.
like, it would be
And then
great.
it's done.
It'd be amazing if everyone treated on arms at the same time.
Yep.
It'd be fantastic. I'd love to see that. I'd love to
Well,
All right, I think that's us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Adelaide.
I don't know if I need this, I'm a bit screechy, anyway, at the best of times. But look, a massive thank you to Wes and Vanessa for having us today. Round of applause. They, along with their workers, Steph and Lexi, who couldn't be here today, have spent hours getting this place ready for us. So, yeah, really in debt to them, and because of their offering, we've been able to do this all on a real shoestring budget. Obviously, thank you to Ecrotek, Jacob, Daniel, especially for your information. Spitwater, Michael Hooper's arrived, he's out the back helping Robert cook the snags. Make sure you say hello to him. Just remember all these sponsors as you go about your business, and you know, look after the people that look after you. A couple of very scribbly notes. Thanks to you guys for taking time out of your Sunday. A lot of you have come a very long way. Look after each other. Hey, this is all a tough time. People are struggling. Phone calls, text messages, drop-in coffees, they're all important. And please, or you've all got my details, make sure you reach out to me at any time with whatever you may or may not need. There's some new people here, say hi to someone you haven't met, and please eat all the food. I don't want any left over. So the boys are cooking that for us now.
and we also want to thank you, Kylie, for putting the show together.
That's my pleasure, and I think Wes is going to draw some names out of a hat.
Yes.
It's in the office. It's in the office.